So you want to own a medieval apiary in England. You picture rows of straw hives turning spring flowers into honey and valuable beeswax. Then one swarm erupts into the sky, another hive collapses in the rain, and a church buyer rejects your smoky wax. Your workers demand no wages, but they can starve or simply fly away. If the bees make the product, why can owning them consume your cash before harvest? Set the operation in southern England around the year 1400. Sugar exists, but it has not yet become an everyday sweetener for ordinary households. Honey therefore reaches kitchens, brewers, bakers, medicine makers, and merchants through many small transactions. Beeswax serves an even more dependable appetite because churches require candles for worship throughout the year. That demand stretches far beyond one village and draws imported wax into English ports. A fenced garden holds rows of rounded hives beneath a light shelter. Most are skeps woven from straw or wicker and protected against the weather. Bees leave through small entrances, work the surrounding landscape, and return carrying the raw material. You own the garden, the shelters, the baskets, the tools, and the products after harvest. The difficult question is whether you truly control the colonies inside. A wooden chest remains where its owner leaves it. A healthy swarm can cross a hedge before breakfast and settle in somebody else's tree. Your most valuable asset is not the empty skep. It is a functioning colony with enough workers, stored food, and reproductive strength to survive another year. The basket is cheap compared with the production system living inside it. You inherit several strong colonies, several weak ones, and a pile of empty skeps needing repair. The garden also contains a wax shed, clay pots, strainers, storage jars, and cutting tools. Spring flowers, nearby woods, hedges, orchards, and uncultivated ground provide the forage you do not own. Your bees can use that landscape, but they cannot reserve it. A neighbor's sheep, an early hay cutting, or several weeks of cold rain can reduce the flow without touching your fence. So the visible apiary occupies a small patch of ground while the real supply chain extends for miles around it. The enterprise needs an experienced keeper, rather than a crowd of permanent employees. Household servants can carry pots, repair fencing, shape straw, and move covers. Only the skilled keeper reads the activity at each entrance and decides which colony can be disturbed. That judgment matters because a medieval skep has fixed comb rather than removable frames. You cannot lift out neat sections, inspect everything, and return the hive unchanged. Much of the business remains hidden behind a moving curtain of bees. Revenue will arrive mainly after harvest, but maintenance begins long before the first sale. The first working day begins in a cold garden with the keeper listening at each skep. One hive answers with a steady hum. Another gives only a few weak movements near the entrance. The keeper lifts a third basket and finds the colony has failed during winter. The empty comb looks like inventory, but it no longer has a workforce. That dead colony removes a future honey crop, a future wax crop, and the chance of producing a new swarm. Its loss is larger than the price of an empty basket. Before earning anything, you must clean the stand and prepare the skep for another colony. The keeper patches holes with fresh binding and seals gaps against rain. Servants replace a rotted bench before its remaining hives follow the first one into the mud. Every repair consumes material and labor during the season when cash is still leaving the business. The early inspection reveals the first rule of apiary economics. Last year's harvest can quietly reduce this year's production. If too much honey was removed before winter, the colony may consume its remaining stores and fail before spring. The owner can increase one autumn's sales by liquidating the food that protects next year's capital. No account book labels that jar as a dead colony 3 months later. The connection appears only when the hive falls silent. Warm days finally arrive and the strong colonies begin crowding their entrances. This looks like growth because each busy hive contains the possibility of another colony. Then the keeper hears the pitch change around one skep. Bees pour from the entrance and gather above the garden like a dark, spinning cloud. The swarm clears the fence while a servant runs for an empty basket and a cloth. Everyone follows it across the lane, through a gate, and into a neighboring orchard. The bees settle around a branch beyond easy reach. A ladder goes up, the empty skep is raised beneath the cluster, and the branch is shaken. Most of the swarm drops into the basket while thousands of stragglers circle the tree. For a moment, your escaped production system fits inside one person's hands. The chase costs an afternoon of labor, but losing the swarm would cost an entire colony's future output. Capture succeeds only because somebody notices the departure and can reach the landing place. A swarm that vanishes into woodland becomes somebody else's opportunity or simply escapes management. Now imagine the branch stands behind a locked gate and the landholder refuses entry. Communities across medieval Europe developed rules and customs for escaped swarms because ownership could literally take flight. The practical dispute mixes evidence, access, local authority, and the speed of pursuit. While two adults argue beside the gate, the swarm is not waiting for paperwork. Your keeper must either recover it quickly or watch a valuable asset depart. This is the strangest ownership problem in the business. You can prove the skep belongs to you more easily than the insects that abandoned it. Back in the garden, the captured swarm is placed beneath a prepared hive. If it accepts the new home, one production unit has become two. If it leaves again, the basket returns to being empty equipment. Successful swarming, therefore, creates capital without a cash purchase. It also divides the original colony's workforce before the main honey flow. More hives do not automatically mean more product in the current season. You now possess two smaller labor forces that must rebuild strength and comb. The bees require no payroll, but their biological schedule still imposes a cost. Lost working time exists even when no worker receives a coin. By early summer, flowers cover the hedges and orchard floor. Foragers stream between the apiary and the surrounding fields. The owner sees free raw material arriving from land maintained by other people. The neighbors see insects using blossoms they planted and boundaries they control. There is no modern pollination invoice waiting to be paid. The orchard may benefit, but that benefit does not become your cash revenue. Your income still depends on what returns to the hive and survives until harvest. Then several days of hard rain trap the foragers inside. Bees consume stores instead of adding to them while water creeps beneath the straw covers. The keeper and two servants hurry through the garden with boards, ropes, and fresh thatch. A wind-blown cover is tied down before the comb beneath it becomes soaked. Another stand sinks into soft ground and tips a heavy skep sideways. The servants lift the basket carefully while the keeper resets the broken comb as well as fixed construction allows. Honey lost into the soil is damaged inventory. Crushed comb removes wax, brood, stored food, and future labor at the same time. The repair also pulls workers away from preparing jars and market containers. One storm, therefore, creates an immediate loss and delays later sales work. The rain passes, but the flowering season does not pause to compensate you. Every missed day of forage is production capacity that cannot be stored for later. When summer turns dry, another conflict appears beyond the apiary fence. A tenant cuts a meadow before the plants finish flowering because the hay has value to him. The bees lose forage, but the tenant protects his own crop. Neither side is acting irrationally. The same landscape cannot always maximize hay, grazing, fruit, timber, and honey simultaneously. Owning hives does not give you ownership of every flower their workers need. This makes location a hidden asset, and neighboring land use a hidden risk. The strongest colonies still build stores, but the weaker swarms remain light. Your keeper weighs them by experienced handling rather than by opening clean wooden frames. Now comes the decision that determines both this year's revenue and next year's capacity. How much product can you remove without taking the colony's winter reserve? Wait too long, and weather or rival bees may reduce the harvest. Take too much, and the apiary sells tomorrow's survival in today's jars. The keeper chooses the heaviest skeps and prepares smoke to calm the bees. Fixed comb makes the harvest a major intervention rather than a tidy withdrawal. The basket is lifted, and sections of filled comb are cut away into a covered vessel. Bees surge around the workers as the operation moves from one selected hive to the next. Some traditional methods removed or combined colonies before taking the comb, while harsher harvests destroyed a colony outright. The economic choice is the same even when the technique differs. Preserving the colony protects future production, but limits how much can be taken easily today. Destroying or exhausting it releases more immediate product while eliminating a living asset. Your representative owner tries to preserve the strongest producers and harvests the weakest more aggressively. That decision looks efficient, until a hard winter tests which colonies were left with enough food. Baskets of comb now fill the processing shed. This is the first moment when months of invisible activity becomes visible inventory. The pale-capped comb contains honey, wax, pollen, and material that must be separated and graded. A servant crushes the comb inside a cloth while thick honey drains into a vessel. A second worker twists the heavy cloth while the wet knot begins to slip. The cloth suddenly loosens, and the collecting pot slides toward the edge of the bench. They catch it before the season's sweetest revenue reaches the floor. The interruption still wastes labor and leaves part of the batch exposed to dirt and moisture. Clean honey brings a better reception than a cloudy mixture filled with fragments of comb. Flavor, color, thickness, and origin can all shape how medieval buyers value honey. The best portion goes into clean containers for demanding customers. Darker or rougher honey can still find a brewer, baker, or household buyer at a lower value. Quality decides which market will accept it and at what discount. The crushed comb now appears empty, but it still contains the product with the steadier institutional demand. Workers warm the residue in water and skim melted wax from the surface. The material is filtered again and poured into simple molds to cool. Smoke, dirt, water, or excessive heat can discolor the cakes and weaken their price. A clean golden block is easier to transport and inspect than a pile of sticky comb. The church does not need your honey to sweeten every meal. It needs wax for candles used in worship, offerings, processions, and commemorations. Late medieval religious practice created demand at parish churches and great foundations alike. English buyers also obtained imported wax because domestic supply did not fully satisfy that appetite. Your village apiary therefore faces a market larger than the village and competition larger than the county. The imported block does not swarm, starve, or care about the weather once it reaches the merchant. It can still undercut you if your own wax is dirty, scarce, or badly timed. The owner loads jars and wax cakes onto a small cart for market. After weeks of biological risk, the products finally face human bargaining. A honey buyer opens one jar, tastes it, and points to moisture around the lid. He claims the batch may ferment and offers less than expected. You accept a discount on part of the lot rather than haul every heavy jar home. Lower sale value becomes the final cost of poor storage, wet weather, or careless processing. The wax receives a different inspection. A church official scrapes one cake, studies its color, and rejects another that smells heavily of smoke. The rejected cake is still wax, but it no longer qualifies for the best customer. It may be sold elsewhere, cleaned again, or carried back for another day. Each option consumes time and delays cash. Even the accepted wax may not be paid entirely at the stall. A known customer can promise settlement after accounts are approved or after a later feast. That promise records revenue without filling your purse today. Meanwhile, the keeper, carter, containers, fuel, and rent have already required real resources. An apiary can finish harvest with valuable goods sold and still lack spendable money. This is where the attractive market for church wax becomes a cash flow trap. Reliable demand is not the same as immediate payment. The jars sold for coins support daily expenses first. Wax sold on trust may become profit later, assuming the buyer pays and no dispute reduces the account. Your owner must also decide whether to sell every clean wax cake or retain material for household use and future obligations. Product consumed, gifted, or paid as rent has value without becoming cash. That distinction matters in an economy where settlement can mix coins, goods, services, and credit. Empty and damaged skeps must be repaired before dry straw becomes scarce. The apiary fence needs another section where livestock pushed through during summer. Heavy colonies require stable stands and weather covers before autumn storms. Weak colonies need enough stores to survive when flowers disappear. Every jar sold has made the apiary look richer while potentially making the colonies poorer. The owner now chooses between distributing cash and rebuilding the reserve. Keeping money idle feels wasteful after a good harvest. Losing several colonies makes that reserve look cheap the following spring. To compare the outcomes, use modeled units rather than pretending we recovered one beekeeper's exact prices. These are illustrative units, not recovered historical prices or wages. Begin with 100 units of liquid reserve before spring work. In an ordinary year, honey, wax, and a small amount of colony stock create 185 units of usable value. Only 145 units arrive as spendable cash before the year closes. Labor, containers, fuel, transport, dues, repairs, and household obligations consume 120 units. That leaves 25 cash units before preparing for winter and replacing weak colonies. Hold back 20 units for those needs, and the owner can safely remove only 5. The apiary looked busy all summer and generated far more value than 5 units. Most of that value either paid other people, remained on credit, or had to protect next year's producers. In a good year, strong forage and successful swarm capture create 270 units of usable value. 240 units arrive in cash, while operating costs rise to 145. After reserving 45 for winter and expansion, the owner can remove 50 units. The margin grows because existing colonies reproduce and gather more than the added labor costs. Biological multiplication becomes the owner's advantage when weather and timing cooperate. In a weak year, rain reduces forage, 2 swarms escape, and several honey lots receive discounts. Usable value falls to 115 units, while only 85 arrives as cash. Most labor, dues, repairs, and winter preparation remain, so cash costs still reach 115. Nothing goes to the owner, and the reserve falls by 30 units. Numerous hives may remain, but weak colonies and unpaid sales cannot settle current obligations. A catastrophic outcome needs no dramatic fire or mass destruction. A cold spring weakens colonies, the main swarms vanish, wet comb lowers quality, and an aggressive harvest leaves too little winter food. Only 55 units of usable value emerge, and 40 arrive as cash. Emergency repairs, ordinary obligations, and replacement attempts consume 135 units. 95 units of reserve disappear, and the apiary enters the next year with fewer productive colonies. The loss is not confined to one bad season because the machines that make the product are alive. Replacing an empty skep does not replace the mature colony that once filled it. This finally answers why wage-free workers can consume so much cash. The bees collect without payroll, but people must house, recover, process, transport, protect, and finance their output. Weather controls working time, neighboring land controls forage, and buyers control when product becomes money. The owner controls the site and chooses how hard to harvest. The skilled keeper performs the judgment that keeps the colonies productive. Servants and carriers perform much of the lifting, processing, repair, and transport. Churches, merchants, and households convert honey and wax into revenue, but not always immediate cash. Local custom and land access become decisive when a swarm crosses the boundary. The owner bears the loss when colonies escape. Stores spoil, wax is rejected, or winter kills future output. Only after labor, obligations, repairs, credit delays, and next year's reserve does any surplus belong to the owner. Owning a medieval apiary never meant commanding thousands of obedient insects. It meant controlling a site, containers, access, knowledge, and the timing of harvest around a workforce that could leave. Sweetness created revenue, and wax created marketable wealth. The hives were property, but the surviving colonies were the business. Profit belonged to whoever could keep that living capital working until the next bloom.